I'm standing outside one of my favorite places to visit around the world. It's Blenheim Palace, the home of the first Duke of Marlborough. It's famous for a number of reasons. The Duke of Marlborough was actually named John Churchill. He was the first famous Churchill. Later gave birth through his descendants to Winston Churchill. But this palace was built for him in the 1700s because of all of his victories over the French on the continent, leading the armies of England and the armies of the Dutch. This magnificent palace was constructed as a tribute and a celebration, a reward. Winston Churchill was born in this palace. There's a room there that marks off the spot where his mother, who had come to attend a ball that evening, as she was dancing, went into labor, and they had to bring her into a side room and give birth to Winston. Kind of an inauspicious beginning to one of the greatest leaders in the 20th century. As you look at this magnificent palace, you walk through the various staterooms and enormous library there in the property, you're struck by the legacy that's passed down to every Marlborough afterward. If you're the firstborn son of each generation, you become the Duke of Marlborough. You inherit this house to be able to live in. But you may not have done anything famous. You may not have won any battles. You may never have led an army, but it doesn't matter because the first Duke of Marlborough and his success, every firstborn child afterward gets to live here and to walk around in this magnificent property. Churchill, his father was the second son, so his father didn't become the Duke of Marlborough. So Churchill was born here, he visited here, he saw the monument to his ancestors' success, but Churchill also knew that if he was going to ever do anything famous, he wouldn't inherit it. He wouldn't inherit a title, wouldn't inherit a palace. He'd have to go out and do something. And Churchill spent most of his life trying to do something of significance. He met with failure continuously. He went almost bankrupt several times, had to write books, try to earn some extra income. In fact, it's said that one of his sources of income for many years was lawsuits and fighting libel lawsuits against him. And Churchill oftentimes was at the very brink of disaster in his career. It wasn't until he was 65 years old that he was made Prime Minister of England, finally had the opportunity to do something of significance with his life. You won't see a palace dedicated to Winston Churchill anywhere. There are statues around the country, certainly, but there's no dukedoms that he inherited. In fact, his grave is not far from this palace, over in the churchyard, beside his parents and his wife, but not the same grandeur as the Duke of Marlborough. Churchill led perhaps in one of the most monumental ways of any person in the 20th century, saved his country from World War II, and he made his own contribution, not by passing down a title, not by just inheriting a palace, but by actually making a difference with his life, fighting against evil. And each of us probably are not going to inherit a palace, we're not going to inherit a dukedom. We should all ask ourselves the question, what legacy will we leave? Probably we're not going to leave a palace to our descendants. They'd go broke trying to keep it heated and cooled. But we can leave a legacy of faith, a legacy of integrity, a legacy of doing the right thing, of making a difference, and leaving a legacy of trusting in God and honoring Him with our life. That's the legacy we can all leave. And even when this palace is nothing but a bunch of ruins one day, maybe centuries from now, when you leave a legacy for eternity, it never wears out. It never needs a restoration. And so each of us can leave a legacy that will last a lot longer than this palace. And I hope that you'll consider how God wants you to leave a legacy to your ancestors that blesses them for more than just centuries, but for an eternity.